Gary Parrish here with USC coach Eric Musselman. Have you got used to the way that sounds yet? USC coach Eric Musselman in the Big Ten.
I have gotten used to Eric Musselman at USC, but not the Big Ten.
Right. It is wild. Just when you've been around the sport for a long time, you've bounced all over the country. Just everything that's going on with college athletics and how geography has sort of been thrown out the window, and you're now at USC in the same league as Rutgers. Just what do you make of all this as somebody who grew up watching college athletics?
Well, first of all, because my dad coached in the Big Ten,
right.
And when I was in second, third, fourth grade, I was used to going to road trips at Michigan, at Michigan State, at Iowa, and it was geographical at that point. But I've only been in the college game, really, Gary, for a small amount of time comparable to the other coaches in this league. But the time that I've been in college basketball, it's really reverted towards the way the pros are. And so to me, you look at Major League Baseball, and the Oakland A's are in one sector of MLB, and then the Giants, and they're across the bridge, but they're not even in the same.
That's right.
So to me, the geographical makeup of where college basketball, college athletics is, it's kind of just mirroring what the pros have done for many years.
I think so many times fans will look at basketball coaches and they'll think of you as a basketball coach. But you're also a husband and a father, and you've lived in a lot of different places. And I don't want you to compare one to the other. I know you've enjoyed time everywhere. But what's it like to be back living in Southern California? It's a real destination for people all over the country, and now you once again get to call it home.
Yeah, and I like calling it home.
Yeah. I think most people do. Most people do.
This is my third time living in L.A. Worked for the Clippers right out of college, and then did the Lakers G League team, and now USC. So for me, super cool to be what we consider back home. I went to college at the University of San Diego, really grew up 8th grade on, in San Diego. So Southern California is home. I met my wife when she was working in L.A. My 2 sons went to the University of San Diego. They grew up in the Bay Area in NorCal. So this is like a perfect spot. And then you add the brand of USC. You add the fact that they're in the Big Ten. And then you add the fact that during the interview process, I loved discussing the landscape of college athletics with our athletic director, Jen Cohen.
Obviously, USC is a huge brand. That's why USC is in the Big Ten. It has mostly historically been on the football side. I know you have a relationship.
And hopefully it keeps being on the football.
Yeah,
I wanted on other sports,
but you wanted to stay there
we
as
want
well.
Lincoln Riley to keep winning,
man. I know you've developed a relationship with Lincoln. You've been to some practices. You've tried to, pull anything from that program that you can. How do you make USC basketball matter the way USC football has and does?
Well, I think, first of all, no matter how much we win, USC football is going to be at the forefront. And I knew that coming in. Like, it's cool. Like, the football program, we want them to win, and we want them to win big. And I'm just, kind of mad that we keep having recruiting visits every time the football team goes on the road. I'm like, when we have a recruiting visit,
you want to do these road trips.
I want to go to the road trips,
Right.
man. Come on, Gary.
Right.
But, when you look at what Lindsey Gottlieb's done on the women's side, they have a star in Juju Watkins. They have games that are sold out. They get the best transfer out of the transfer portal. She's built that into a premier women's basketball destination. And so we have to figure out how can we figure out our own personal niche on the men's basketball side to what Lindsey's done and then to what Coach Riley's doing.
I just sort of thinking through this as you're talking. I don't know if it's weird, but it's certainly a contrast. You go from being the head coach of a basketball program that is undeniably the biggest thing in the state, and now you're the head coach of a basketball program where you're not the biggest thing on your campus. Shohei Ohtani lives down the street.
Gary, this is true. I don't mean to interrupt, but I have to interrupt.
Yeah.
The only time I get asked for a picture in L.A. is if it's an Arkansas fan.
There you go. Well, it's funny. Many years ago, I was out in L.A., and I was sitting in a restaurant in Westwood with Ben Howland, coming off 3 straight Final Fours, and I'm not exaggerating. We sat there in peace. Nobody asked for an autograph. Nobody asked for a picture. It just didn't matter in L.A. And whereas
that's good to know. I was starting to think it was just
no,
me.
It's not just you. It's you and every other college basketball coach in L.A. But like I bet you didn't have a meal in Arkansas once where somebody didn't approach your table, and it's just a different world.
It's a different world, and you're right. Like the last year at Arkansas to try to get into a football game from my wife's parking spot to it took us almost 45 minutes. Right. So it is a completely different landscape. But it's super cool to be able to walk the Strand, and you walk by Clayton Kershaw, and nobody says anything to him. I'm just kind of watching this thing, and I'm like, that's the best pitcher in baseball. And nobody
one of the best ever.
Nobody stopped him. But that's L.A.
That's L.A. It's interesting. You mentioned transfers. You were one of the guys who embraced transfers before everybody else started recognizing we have to take them. You would take them at Nevada. You'd sit them out. And then build a NCAA tournament team, conference champion. Obviously, now everybody is operating in that market. What did you recognize early that it took some other guys to maybe a year or two later?
Well, the first thing when I got the job at Nevada was I didn't think we could get a McDonald's All-American, or I didn't think that we could get top 75 players. I thought we were going to, even if we did an incredible recruiting job, maybe we could get players in that 75 to 150 range, and that would be doing really good. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, those guys in that 75 to 150 range aren't good enough to beat Steve Fisher at San Diego State.
That's right.
So I'm like, well, we don't want to lose to them all the time, so how do we? And it was get mature players. It was have them sit out, have them understand our culture, have them understand our practice habits, and then try to find guys that were multi-positional. And we found it in Jordan Caroline, who was a all-league player, and then really Caleb and Cody Martin changed the complexion not only of the Nevada basketball program but my coaching career as well, because like with coaches, it's always players who change our careers, right. And they're not mentioned enough. Like, we're not really good coaches. We just had really good players at that particular time.
I saw you mention, I believe it was to my colleague John Rothstein, how your coaching history helped prepare you for this landscape. Point being, you've worked in international basketball, you've worked in minor league basketball where roster turnover is just happening nonstop, and just sort of sometimes, particularly in the G League, or you show up and you're like, okay, who I got today? That is kind of what college basketball has become on some level. Not across the board, but you really have gone from coaches talking about building programs over 3, 4, 5 years to you've got to almost remake a roster every offseason. If you could just expand on how your past helps you understand better, perhaps, how to navigate these waters.
Yeah, I think the past, right now, like every time there's a change, I think my past helps. Yeah. So now it's the travel. Yeah. You know, so I have gone from Oakland, California, on a flight to Orlando, Florida, and had a shoot-around getting ready for the Orlando Magic. And I'll never forget Donald Foyle grabbing me at 10:01 for a 10 a.m. shoot-around. He goes, Coach, you're a rookie. Don't ever do this again. Right. On the first end of a road trip when you go west to east. Because of the so we're not having any morning shoot-arounds on our first trip when we go. That's a learning experience through professional travel and so on. And then I think
some other coach might have to learn that.
Oh, they're going to
January, right? They're going to learn it.
They're going to learn it. Right. It might take them longer than January. I already know the lesson,
right?
Because my team said we're not shooting around. Right. We'll stretch, but that's it. But I do think with the player stuff, we don't flinch. Mm-hmm. Like if we have a whole new group of guys, like. You coach in the G League, and it's like you get a call from the Warriors, and they say, hey, we're giving you Jeremy Lin, and you got him for 2 weeks. Right. And then he goes out and scores 27, 29, 34, and then he's gone. Right. And then you got to figure out how to win the next game without a guy who just scored 35 for you. Right. And so the changing landscape of rosters does not – and I tell our staff all the time, we're not flinching. Right. We just move on to the next thing.
Last thing before I get you out of here. Obviously, you take over a program there's incredible roster turnover. I believe you're bringing in double-digit transfers this season.
13 new players, 12 scholarship.
What does success look like for you in year one in the Big Ten? Because obviously it's on paper it looks like it could be a challenge.
Yeah, and a lot of people have us at the bottom of the preseason rankings. We understand that. People say they don't care about – our team already knows it, and I've talked about it, and I'll talk about it more, and I'll continue to talk about it. We will use it as motivation. Right. Everybody says they don't, but we will. But having said that, I don't think it's any different, Gary, than in year one at Nevada, year one at Arkansas. It's respect. Right. So when these preseason rankings come out, it's just a lack of respect. So how do you gain respect of media members? How do you gain respect of opposing coaches? How do you gain respect of opposing players? And just as importantly, how do you gain respect with the referees?
Right.
Because that becomes a whole. And then most importantly, how do you get respect of your own fan base, your alumni and your boosters, all those things? And you just do that by playing with great energy and great effort, which is, getting back to your point, that's what we're trying to do.
I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Gary.
All right.